So now it's time for part 2. How do you start adding comments for a particular item?
Okay, so let's continue on with our building out our comments feature for our Power App form. And so just to recap real quick, so we have our form here, we have our comment section for this particular item, this particular request, and it's just displaying the comments. There's no way for the user to come in here and actually add a comment. And so we're going to do that now. We're going to do that for the edit screen or the edit view for our form. So let's go ahead and over here in Power App Studio, we have the 3 different views, right? The view, the edit, and the new. What we want to do is go ahead and go into our edit. Let me maximize this a little bit, zoom in. And go ahead and add our first thing we want to do is add in our comments tab. So we're going to do this in 3 easy steps. Let me just show you my cheat sheet that I'm working with on a separate screen. First thing we're going to do is set up our comments tabs, get all that wired up. This is going to be a review with the buttons, the variable, yada, yada, yada. Then we're going to add in our comment control, which is going to be a separate control from what we use from our form component, right? So we're not going to use, so normally what we've been doing so far is taking these this form component and all the data cards within it and using these field values to save and add items to a list. But now we're dealing with a separate list, right? As we set up in the previous video. So we have this comments list that's actually going to save the comment for this particular application. That's this column here. And then for an item within that application, all the comments are related to that item. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. So we want to go ahead and add in our button. So I'm going to just take this attachments button, copy and paste that. And then I'm going to just move all these guys over just a hair, a smidget. Again, this is all subjective, right? You know, I'm eyeballing this and determining the spacing between them and all this other good stuff. So this is not rocket science. And now that I have my new button, what I want to do is go ahead and rename it to comments. So I go to the text property and then put in the word comment here, or maybe comments, right? And now I want to grab the ellipse here and then just center back to match the ordering or the stack order for the rest of the buttons. Now once I have that piece done, I'm gonna go to the on select for that new button that I created, and this is where I want to add in a new variable. So instead of show tab 3 being the end, I want to do show tab 4, and this is the one that I'm creating, right? And for this particular button, the one that's on the end, number 4, I want that to be true, but for the other 3, I need to set them to false for that particular button, right? So now if I go to the attachments button, which is number 3 in our list now, I want to copy this same formula, but for show tab 4, I also want to turn this to false for that particular button. And actually, I'm going to do that for the next 2 buttons. So let me copy this. Let me take away this extra space. And then select this description button, which is the second one, and that should have show tab 4 false, and then the first one that should have show tab 4 is false. All right, so now this should be wired up to where this is not displaying anything, and we kind of have this primed and ready to add in our field. So now that we have this added, what I want to do is add in a text box or text control, and what this component is going to do, this is going to allow me to hold the comment to allow the user to submit a new comment, right? So this is going to be a separate text control, and it's outside of the form component that we are used to, that we used to use to write data, as I mentioned before. So let me slide this down. I have a text box control, and now I can come in here and add in the label. And what this label is doing is just, what I'm really trying to do is simulate what I have here, right? So you see how I have that description, and then the field, you can't see it because it's kind of hidden behind here, but I have a description, then a text box for the actual description. I want to replicate that as well for my new controls. So what I want to do, let me just see if I can line this up exactly, so that way when my users are navigating from tab to tab, this spacing is correct. And again, I'm just eyeballing this just to try to make it as close as possible and to have this text box feel as natural as possible. Alright, so let me hold on my Alt key, click on this, and I think the one thing I was missing just from a formatting piece is that I want to make that semi-bold, the label itself, make it semi-bold. Uh-oh, I was selecting, what happened here? What's this? Did I copy this? Alright, let me delete this. Sorry about that. So this is semi-bold, and that's pretty close to where I think it's actually bold. Alright, enough playing around. Let's go with semi-bold and leave it at that. Alright, and then the text input box, this is going to allow me to put the comment section here. But the problem is, if I go, there's a couple of things. One, I don't want this to say text input, because if I leave that there, anytime the user wants to add a comment, they have to delete that and start adding in their comment. So we're going to have to fix that. That's a separate property. But the biggest piece is this needs to fill up the entire box. Right now is operating as a single line text, meaning that this is just like a first name, last name, like one of those small text input boxes. So we actually want to have this set up as a description. So to do that, let's just select the text box, come over here to the right for the mode, and select that to multi-line, and that's going to allow it to fill up all the lines within the text area that we provide. And the other thing we want to do is get rid of that default text, right? That text input. Let's just go ahead and select that to blank, right? So now my users, when they come in to try to fill this out, one, they don't have to erase any placeholder text, and they can use the entire box to submit the comment that they want to submit. All right, so we're looking good so far. Now, the other thing I want to do, let's go ahead and group this label and that text boxes. I want the visible property to be the same for both of those, and I can simplify that formula process by using the group. Now, all I've done to select those was I hold down my control key, select the items that I want to group, and then come over here to my outline. I don't know what this toolbox, right? I don't know what to call this exactly. Right click in here, and then you can say, not right click, left click on the ellipse, and then select group. And I'm gonna just go ahead and give it a name, so that way I know that this is the comment group. And I'm gonna prefix this with GRP, right? And then just say comments. All right, so now that I have my group established, I can select this group, go to the visible property, and now what I want to do is for that variable that I just created, show tab 4, that's what I want the visible property for this guy to be set to. So I'm going to just do show tab 4, and to test this out, I'm going to hold down the Alt key and then click on these guys. So you notice that my text and my label and comment field are not displayed when I'm clicking on show tab 1, 2, or 3, but as soon as I click on show tab 4, it appears, and then if I click off of that, it disappears. So this is working as expected. Now we have some weird things going on with my button because it's matching the field property of my attachments button, because that's the button I copied to create it. So let's go ahead and fix that. So if I go to the field property, instead of having this field with the dark color for show tab 4 variable, let's switch that to show tab 3. Let's switch that to show tab 4. And now if I alt select this, this is being highlighted when it's selected as expected. So this is good. The last thing I want to do, now here's another thing. Now that I have this as a group, a single click is going to select the group as a whole. But then if you want to go to an element within that group, you just select that element as a second click, and then that will highlight, as an example here, my text input field. So what I want to do, I want to rename this because I'm going to use this comment field in the formula. So I'm going to just do txt comment, right? and that's going to give me that's going to highlight that comment text field so I can use it in the formula. The last thing we want to do, and this is all step one, this is wiring up my comments tab and setting the visible property on all this other good stuff and resetting my formulas to reflect the new variable show tab 4. The last thing I want to do is go into the SharePoint integration, right? And my on edit event, I need to set that show tab 4. So if I expand this out, you can see that I have the default, the initial values from when this form, when the edit view first loads up, the initial values is going to set this variable to true, show tab 2 to false, 3, so on and so forth. I need to add in show tab 4 and set that false. And the reason why this is false for show tab 4 is because we want this to, when it initially loads, we want the basic tab to be highlighted. Oops, clicking too much here. We want the basic tab to be highlighted, and if we look at the on select property for that basic tab, it has just that, those initial values. 1 is true, everything else is false, as you can see there. All right, cool. Let's go ahead and save this, push this up, and let's take a look at it. And again, this is just to what we're doing. We're doing all of this work, right, to overcome the append changes to text field, which is, as of today, not supported by powerapps. I'm sure it's probably coming, and I know that last time I checked on user voice, it was under review, so I know this is coming. So this workaround hopefully may not be something that we have to leverage in the future, right? This would naturally work hopefully in the future. All right, so let's go ahead and test out our comment field. And again, all we're testing out is to make sure that our new tab is loading correctly, right? We're going to be able to use that text box, but it's not going to save anything because we didn't wire that up. And we just want to make sure that this text field here on the initial load is not popping up, right? It's not getting in the way. So if I go to edit mode, it's not there. That's good. Description is not there. Hit comments, it displays. I can put in information here, hit save, and nothing really is going to happen. If I go to the comment section, look at comments, I don't have any new entries for 12/31/954, right? So what you have in there is all my 12/31 stuff that I've been testing with, but nothing that, as a sense that you and I have used to build this out. All right. So far this is working as expected. I have my new comment tab. It's hiding, showing things as expected, so we're good. Okay, let's do step 2. Step 2 is to actually wire this text field up. And what we want to do, we want to be able to, we're not going to save it to our equipment to list, but rather we're going to save it to our comments list. And we want to save it using these columns here, right? So we have the application column that we have to put information in. We have the ID of the current item, and then the person who's actually created the comment, and then the actual comment. Those are the 4 items that we need to save. Now, when it comes to, there are other items on this list, right? So if you go to add column and show hide, there are other columns on this list like modified, ID, compliance, attachments, yada, yada, yada. We're not concerned with those, right? So those are not ones that we want to update or we need to update. And when it comes to created, modified, created by, and modified by, we actually cannot update those columns. If you try to update these, it may throw an error, or it's just going to ignore your update, because those are the ones that are managed by SharePoint out of the box. So let's go ahead and wire in our 4 columns that we need to save. Now, to save this, it's actually pretty straightforward, and our SharePoint integration is going to be the glue to make this happen. So if you select the SharePoint integration module here, and then go to this on save event, and this is everything that happens when it starts to save the actual item. And so to save this, we have to use a special function, and it's called patch. And then the patch function, what it's looking for is say, okay, you want me to update a data source, and that's how Power Apps look at it. It doesn't care if it's a list or if it's a data table or database or whatever the case may be. It says you want me to update a data source. What is the name of that data source? So in our case, it's going to be comments. And this is where it gets a little weird, right? So what I'm going to do, I'm going to put the patch in, I'm going to specify the data source, and then I'm going to do these curly braces, and then I'm going to close my parenthesis. And that's more of a syntax thing, right? Because I don't want to lose, like usually if you open something, you have to close it or else you get this error. And I don't want this to kind of get lost in translation. Now, in my curly braces, this is where you need to specify on the comments and data source, in our case, the SharePoint list, what's the name of the column you want to update. That's the first value. Then there's a colon, and what's the value that you want to put in that column. So in our case, we want to do title, colon, and then we want to hard code, and I'm going to do this in double quotes, equipment, and I'm going to do this wrong, right, list, or equipment requests, right? And I'm typing this from memory, but what you want to do, you want to go to your comments list, and then this is the column that we're updating in that patch value, right? And I can start with any one of these. The ordering doesn't matter, but the syntax is everything. So you have to get this right, or else it's going to throw an error. So every time that we write a comment to this list, we need to specify equipment request, because that's the name of this application. And as we discussed in the previous video, we're setting this comments list up to support many applications. So here we need to specify that this is a comment for this application, for this item, created by this person, and here's the actual comment. Those 4 pieces of information are critical. So you may be asking, okay, this column name is application, where did you get title from? And this is one thing that you have to realize with SharePoint list columns. The column has 2 names. You have an internal name and you have a display name. The internal name is what we use in the formulas. And I think we discussed this either in the previous video or in the previous series of videos. But that's a key concept that you have to remember when you're dealing with SharePoint lists. You have an internal name and you have a display name. Now, to get the internal name, if you go to the list settings for this particular list, and this is the comments list, and for application as an example, if you click on that guy, up here in the URL, if you scroll all the way to the right, there's a field query string parameter, and that field query string parameter is going to have the internal name for this particular column, which is title, right? So now, so that's how you grab those. And I think for all of our other columns, the display name and the internal name are the exact same, so we're not concerned with anything else in our list. So there's creator. We just took a look at item ID before that, and then there's just double check comment, and comment is there. So outside of the application, if you take the display name, or what you see as the display name, you can use that same field in the formula. All right, so let's go back. So now we want to make sure that for application we hard code equipment request, because that's our application, and title equipment request. Make sure your spacing and your casing is the exact same. Now, to get the other columns updated, you just use a comma, and then here I'm going to use item ID, colon, and here I need the ID of the request item that I'm submitting the comment for. So let me go back to my equipment. So I need this ID here, right? And it's going to be different for each one of these items, right? As you can see here, it's different. So how do you pull that in dynamically? So the application piece is not dynamic. We want to hard code that because we know what the application is. But for the ID, that's going to change depending on the current item. So to get that, you just do SharePoint integration, right? Dot selected list item ID, and that's going to dynamically give you that ID for that item, right? So that's that, comma. Now we need to do creator, and you notice that the column names do not have quotes, but the values or anything, the value piece of it, if you're hard coding, has to have quotes. But when you specify the column name, you don't put that in the string, you just specify the name itself. In some cases, you get IntelliSense, so it would actually help you out to make sure that you're spelling the name right and the casing is right. But I think in this view, for whatever reason, it's not helping me with that. But anyway, you just make sure that they're the exact same name. Comment says, just make sure this is the exact same name, right? And you should be good to go. So now for the creator, what this is going to be the current user. And we use that with this user function. That's going to give me the current user. And if you do the current user dot, these are the values that you have available to you. So you can do the image URL, which is to their profile picture, or their full name or the email address. We're going to use the full name, right? And then we do comma, and then how do we spell comments? Is it comment? All right, comment. Right, colon, and now we need the comment that the user's inputting. And here we just use the, and this is that when we renamed it, right, the text, right, so this is our group comment, and then text.comment, that's what we renamed it. And then IntelliSense is going to help us out. So if you do txt, there's your comment, but this is just a component, right, or the control. We need the value that's inside of that. So if you do a dot, you'll see all the properties that you can set for a text field component. But what we want to send to the SharePoint list is the actual value, right, which is on the text property for that component. And really, that's it. A lot of explanation on using patch and then correlating all of our columns within the SharePoint list or data source, but really that's it. So once you understand that piece, you can add as many columns as you want within this patch process. Just keep everything inside of your curly braces, right? And you just do a comma delimited for every field that you want to update. But keep in mind, when it comes to created, modified, created by, modified by, those are fields that you don't specify the current values for, because SharePoint is going to take care of that for you. Alright, so that's that. Let's just make sure, let's see if this thing works. So let's just save it up, push it up to SharePoint, and test it out. Now, I think that's the last piece of it, right? So we added control, we added the save process, and test. And that's critical, right? Because a lot of, you don't want to, especially when you're dealing with formulas and things like that, you want to make sure that you have a lot of scenarios taken care of, and you do what I would say sufficient testing to make sure that if there's an issue, you catch it, and your business users or whoever you're creating this application for don't catch it, because that just looks bad, right? So, okay, so now what we want to do, we have our comments field. Let's just put in a value. Let's say free comment 1, and I'm going to copy this because I'm going to keep using this over, and I'm going to say that all. And if I come into that value, the item that I selected, and if I scroll down, and there's my free comment 1. Okay, fine. So that looks good. Now that was for ID 20. If I go to ID 18 and look at its comment section, I should not see free comment 1. And I do not see that, which is good. Alright, so now let's go in here, comment section. Now now when you go into the comment section, it's defaulting to the last value entered in the item that's not even related to this. And this is when you're dealing with controls that are outside of the form, because our form component does a lot of this work for us. So because we're updating a SharePoint list outside of this component here, there's a lot of manual steps that we have to do to ensure that when we click on one item, put in the value, save it off, click on a different item in the same list, the value that I put in the previous list is not defaulted into that text box. And that's what's happening here. And we're going to clean it. We're not going to clean it up in this video because I want to kind of keep these videos to a particular topic. But in the next video, we do a lot of adjustments, cleanups, and all this other good stuff. But for now, we know that's a known issue. And let me just clarify. What's happening is that this comment is not saved. This is just a pretext or the default value for this text box, if that makes sense. It's not saved until I hit save. So if I come in here and change this to comment 2, click save. Now if I go into this item, oh, I forgot which item I was in. Now if I go into this item, was it this one? No, it was the second one, wasn't it? I lost track of which item I selected. So I have the free comments too, right? But if I go into the first item, as you saw before, hit comments, this still should be free comments 1. But if I go into edit mode, because the last value I put in that text box was free comment 2, it's going to default that and it says, do you want to use free comment 2? And this gets really weird, and this is not how it should work, right? When you're editing the item, like once you put this comment in and you save it off, this should be blank to be ready to enter for the next comment that the user wants to enter in. All right, so we'll fix that in the next video. But for now, I'm going to delete this, hit save. And what's going to happen is this is also saving blank comments, which is something else that we don't want to do and we need to fix in our next video, right? So, but for now, as far as wiring up a field in the edit mode, put it in our comment section as we done here, and getting this to show hide as we expect it to, and allowing the user to put in comments and save it to that particular list item, we are done. And that's it for this video. Oops. Did I go into the wrong one? I went into the wrong one. I keep losing track on which one I'm using. Right. So that's working as expected. All right. So in the next video, what we want to do is we need to clean up a few things. One, the comments should be, the recent comments should always be at the top. So we need to adjust that piece. We'll fix that. The other thing is that default value that we just talked about, we need to fix that. That should be blank every time they hit the comment section. What else? Oh, it should not be saving blank comments. That doesn't make sense, right? This entry here only if they're filling out the comment box should it be saving the comment. If they're not filling out the comment box, it should not save it. So we need to fix that in the next video. And then I think we got some other cleanup things to do, but I'll come up with a list, and then that will be the dedication for the next video. It's just, how do you clean this up? All right, so that's it for this. Any questions, leave it in the comment section. In the meantime, I'll see you in the next video. All right, take care.